So one thing that I mentioned earlier is how to optimize our cutters. We only really need the cutters to exist only slightly outside of the geometry that we are cutting. So we can grab this geo. I will do an object merge here. Let's bring this over here, and we can use a VDB from polygons, and we can do an SDF from this as well. So let's maybe just turn down this voxel size, maybe 0.01, and we want to increase or rather expand this SDF. So let's do a VDB reshape SDF, and we want to use the operation dilate, and we will just increase this offset to maybe something like this. And now for our main cutters, we can create a group. Let's drop down a group node, place this as our second input, and let's use points. Disable base group and keep in bounding regions, and we will use the bounding volume. So now we can see that the points are being selected only if they're inside this SDF. So let's maybe rename this to keep, and I will do a blast node. Let's select our keep over here at the bottom, and we want to delete non-selected. So now we essentially call our cutters to be only outside of the geometry, because if we look at this, the Boolean fracture will also calculate a lot of these intersections that are happening outside of the geometry, which we are really not interested in. So we want to keep the cutters existing only outside of the geometry by a little bit, by a little margin. So if I were to also look at my geometry, if I template this, we can see how this optimization works. Okay, so let's make sure that this still works, and I will go to my Boolean fracture, and now we can see that this is instant, so we saved a lot of time computation-wise, and everything works. Now, aside from our main cutters, we also want to introduce some custom planes to just increase the variation and randomness a little bit. So let's maybe move all of these nodes a little bit below. And for our secondary cutters, we'll do a chain over here. So for our second cutters, we will start from this VDB, so from this fog volume. Let's do another scatter over here to the side, and we want to scatter maybe just a few points, maybe 15. Let's try 15 points. And we want to use this to copy some grids onto. So let's drop down a grid. So let's make sure that this is large enough to intersect our geometry. So maybe if I template this, I think the default values should be fine, because we will further optimize this down the road anyway. So I'll just increase the rows for this geometry, maybe even more. Let's use 200 by 200. And let's right away also assign a texture to this as well, because we want to copy it onto our fractured pieces. So let's drop down a UV quick shade, and I think this default scale should be fine. We can look at our geometry. Let's maybe do another UV quick shade here and preview this instead. Okay, so I think the default will be fine. I think this roughly matches our geometry, so this will be fine. UV quick shade, and then let's maybe just copy these two mountain nodes to our grid. So I'll hold down Alt, copy these over, and we end up with something like this. Perfect. Let's use a copy to points now and copy it onto our points. All right, so here we have it. Of course, we have to randomize the n. So let's drop down an attribute randomize node. This will be set to attribute name n, and we want to use the direction or orientation. So this is what we end up with. Let's maybe turn off the material display. And we can simply merge these together. Maybe I'll drop down a null. So this will be our second cutters. And we can just merge these here with our main cutters. All right, and bring this down. Maybe organize this a little bit. Okay, so we merge these both together, and we do a group, and we get rid of everything we don't need. And I'm not sure if we can tell, but I can disable this, and we can see that this is our additional cutters. So now back in our exploded view, everything should still be updating. And let's give this a second. We can see that this is a fairly fast operation because of the optimization. And if I turn on the material display, all of these inside have the correct UV, and we should be good to go from here. So let's turn this off. And one final thing that I could do here before the exploded view, let's just drop down a normal and recompute the normal for only the inside pieces. All right, and I'll keep this as the default 60. All right, so this should be fine. So now from here, we can just simply do a file cache and we can just cache out our pieces. Let's turn off version and time-dependent cache. Set this base folder as job, and I'll just name this to fractured pieces. And we can just save this. All right, drop down a null. So this will be our pieces final, whatever you want to name this will be the pieces that we're going to use. So this is it for the fracture setups, and we can move forward.